So over the last 2 years, I've been developing an international research project entitled Envisioning Global LGBT Human Rights. I'm the research lead on the project, and it's been a slow process of developing the research team, which is now 25 members of the research team and 33 partners based in Canada, India, English-speaking Caribbean, Uganda, Kenya, Botswana, and South Africa. And essentially, our goals are four interrelated, interconnected aspects. So first of all, we are looking at criminal code laws, and we are concentrating on the Commonwealth because 50%, half of the laws in the world that continue today, are as a legacy of the British colonial period. Secondly, then we're looking at contemporary movements that are resisting criminalization and seeking to advance human rights. And we wanted to work with partners and organizations in different countries that are actively engaged in those struggles, where there is existing organizations, and in some cases organizations that have mounted legal challenges to laws, such as in Botswana, or the case that was decided by the High Court of Delhi in July 2009 in India. Also cases going forward in Guyana and in Belize. So the third aspect of this is asylum, because people are forced to leave their countries of origin because of persecution and violence. And we're focusing on Canada and South Africa as two countries to which people are coming and who do accept asylum claims based on sexual orientation or gender identity. But as we've heard also from Robert, the nature, the way in which people's claims for asylum are treated or assessed by the Immigration Review Board in Canada, for example, are in many cases very problematic. And there is not a great deal that has been done in terms of studies to actually examine and understand this. And then fourthly, we're looking at international human rights mechanisms and the relationship between and the interaction between grassroots LGBT organizations and international human rights mechanisms. What happens when organizations approach the United Nations in terms of their claims. So in order to do this, what we've attempted to do is to build an international, interdisciplinary, multilingual team that is based in all regions of the study. And we're working in India, the Caribbean, East Africa, and South Africa, as I mentioned. The research team brings together expertise from a number of different areas, because in order to grapple with this issue, in order to understand this issue, we need to be able to understand the history. We need to be able to enlist discussions around sexuality and sexual studies. We need to be able to understand law. We need to be able to understand asylum. We need to be able to understand the sociology, and particularly the history of social movements. We need to understand health, HIV/AIDS, and the relationship between HIV/AIDS and LGBT rights organizing. So we've brought together a very interdisciplinary team, and it is also a team that is both academic as well as community-based work, community-based scholarship, community-based theory. And we're also working in the field of documentary and participatory video, which is my own field and an area that I've worked in for 30 years. And I shouldn't perhaps introduce myself a little bit, but I have over the last 30 years done a lot of work on the history of lesbian and gay rights organizing in Canada. I have a body of work called From Criminality to Equality that documents 40 years of lesbian and gay trans rights organizing history in Canada. And I'm very much involved also in what I would call participatory video, which is teaching people video in order that they can use video as a means to document their history. So part of the way in which we're doing this work is through participatory video. So our approach, I think, is first of all, we've built a kind of strategic alliance between international organizations such as ARC International, International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, which are partners on the Envisioning team, and grassroots organizations who are best placed to understand the conditions in their locality and the ways in which people are impacted by these laws and by human rights abuses. We are also, I think, have developed enlisted an integrated anti-oppression model in our research and in our approach to the research that tries to understand the interconnections and the relationships between race, gendered, class forms of discrimination as they impact upon sexual minorities. We have a critical perspective on globalization and neoliberalism. Our perspective is informed by a critical perspective on neoliberalism and the imposition of normalized heterosexuality and minoritized homosexuality on indigenous forms of gender and expression, gender eroticism, and sexual orientation. And also, of course, as was mentioned earlier, a critical perspective on the terminology LGBTI, although we are using it because it is recognized within international forums, and I think more it's recognized, but at the same time, there are many, I can't go into here, many aspects whereby that terminology, first of all, is not comprehended, is not used, is a Western definition, is one that we have to be quite wary of. And I also think one that tends to fix people within a particular identity rather than understanding the fluidity that may exist around identity based around gender or sexual orientation. We have a participatory action research model. That is that the participants in the research are involved in the co-production of knowledge throughout the project, from the standpoint of developing the project goals and the research questions, the way in which we will gather the research, and so on, and the video production. And we intend to share the research results of this project across the team, and are essentially supporting the linkages that exist between different communities within Canada and the countries where we're working. So in Toronto, there is an LGBT settlement network, for example, that has about 50 organizations associated with it now. And our partners include peoples of African descent, peoples of Caribbean descent, and peoples of South Asian descent, and who do maintain links with countries of origin. And so we are essentially reinforcing and supporting those linkages through the process of this research. So in terms of criminalization, we're going to begin by looking at an overview of the laws in the Commonwealth, with particular focus on the countries where we were working. We will conduct an in-depth legal audit and examine the relevant domestic laws and constitutional provisions and the scope of their authority in effect in each of the countries in which we are working. In terms of asylum, as I mentioned, we're focusing in Canada and South Africa. Canada, given Robert has noted the changes in the legislation in Canada, so we are, I think, able now to look over the next 5 years of this study at what is the impact on sexual minorities in terms of those changes in legislation, and also essentially how we're developing the asylum work is by a roundtable, pulling together people who are working in the area of asylum and refugee work with LGBT organizations. We're going to follow a similar model in South Africa. When I went to South Africa to meet with organizations there, we were originally thinking about doing work on asylum in South Africa, but every organization that we met with in LGBT organizations and groups in South Africa told us that they were encountering people, many people coming to their door who were asylum seekers, who were often in desperate conditions. And they had no means, no resources to be able to provide them with supports and so on. So we decided, in consultation with those organizations, to also try and develop a component of this research to address that. So, in terms of resistance to criminal code laws, I am actually very interested in histories of social movements, and so our hope with this work is to document some of that work, and I'll give you a bit of an understanding of what we're planning concretely. In India, in October, we will begin shooting a documentary on the history that led to the High Court of Delhi's decision that struck down Section 377 of the India Penal Code, carnal knowledge against the order of nature. Same history of the law, in fact, actually began in India and was brought back to Great Britain, and then through the valises of the various colonial administrators spread throughout the British Empire. Quotes. In Botswana, we're going to work with Legabibo, Lesbian and Gays of Botswana, to do a documentary. Here in Uganda and Kenya, we're doing participatory video and working with partners here in video to document the histories of organizations. And in the Caribbean, similarly. In February of this year, we're bringing together a roundtable workshop in the Caribbean, a regional workshop together with ARC International's Regional Dialogue. And we'll be bringing people from India, from East Africa, from Botswana to come together with people from across the Caribbean region to focus on workshops on documented human rights abuses and on strategies and discussions around decriminalization and the ARC dialogue. And in terms of international human rights mechanisms, our key questions are essentially, how do international treaty bodies and human rights mechanisms interact with LGBT human rights initiatives? We're working with ARC International, who have been working in Geneva and in New York for the last, I guess since about 2005, and who have gained a tremendous amount of experience in that field. At the same time, also, we want to look at some of the other key regional bodies, such as the African Commission, and in the Caribbean and Latin America, the Organization of American States, which have been increasingly bodies that LGBT regional coordinating LGBT work have focused on to try to advance LGBTI rights regionally. So I think I'm probably almost out of time, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you to all the speakers for speaking in a thoughtful way that allows for some questions now.